Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we are on the precipice of 2026 NFL draft. I'm super excited for this draft because I feel like there's way more unpredictability with what each team is going to be doing. And I'm just so excited to be able to see what that looks like. I will say at the start of this draft, I think it's going to be pretty straightforward and pretty obvious. But I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities to take swings on positions that were otherwise not like premium positions. So I'm just super excited to see what's going to happen. So I'm just going to go real quick, pick by pick, and just kind of share my thoughts and kind of what I think is going to happen. Starting with, of course, number one with the Las Vegas Raiders here. I think this is probably the most obvious draft pick in the entire class. I think this is going to be pretty clearly Fernando Mendoza. Everything they've been doing in the offseason suggests it, so we're not going to stick on that one too long. Number two, I also think is going to be pretty straightforward. I think that's going to be Arvell Reese, the edge or linebacker out of Ohio State. I will say, I think going into the draft, they're going to be much more hesitant about this pick, and they're probably going to put a lot more thought into a guy like Ruben Bain or David Bailey, just because of what Arvell Reese did at his pro day. When they put him through the edge drills, he did look shaky. So maybe they're looking for someone who's more of a pure edge rusher, but you got to take a swing on the upside, and Arvell Reese certainly has the higher ceiling out of those other guys that are there on the board. Number three, Arizona Cardinals. This is where things, I think, can shake up. They can go a bunch of different directions. I've seen some people say they should take Jeremiah Love, which Jeremiah Love's an amazing player, and I think he would be a great fit here. I've seen some people say that they should go an edge rusher, Ruben Bain, David Bailey. Josh Sweat's injury prone, and then also I think is pretty unhappy right now in Arizona. But with all that being said, I think they're on this path where they're probably going to be taking a quarterback soon. They have an offensive mind who came in LaFleur. So I think they just go with an offensive lineman. I think this is Francis Mauigoa, offensive tackle out of Miami. It gives you the most flexibility moving forward, and I think it's important to have really good frontline protection. And then number four, this is Jeremiah Love. I think there could be, depending on how they value players, they could say, hey, we want Ruben Bain, or we want David Bailey, or even, hey, we want Sonny Styles. He was a freak in the combine too. But Jeremiah Love just does so many different things well. He ran a 4.3. He was doing the wide receiver drills at the combine. He has unbelievable footage and tape. He does everything that you need to at the running back position that I think he just takes such a burden off of Cam Ward, because the defense has to game plan for all the different things that Jeremiah Love brings to that offense, which I think makes everything a lot easier as a whole. And Cam Ward was pressured a ton, so being able to take a burden off of him and allow him to continue to develop, I think, is such a win. We move on to the Giants. I love what they're doing. I love what Harbaugh's been building. I love what they've been doing in free agency. I think this is where it comes down to probably like a Caleb Downs or a Sonny Styles. This is where I think, based off of the injury concerns with Caleb Downs, he does have the knee deterioration thing that's going on, which is the exact same thing that Will Johnson had when he was coming out last year. Going into the draft, everybody thought Will Johnson was CB1 and that this guy was going to be a top 10 guy. And then it comes out that he has a deterioration thing in his knee, and he ends up falling to the mid-second round. Now, I don't think Caleb Downs is going to experience that same type of fall. I still think he's a top 10 guy. I just don't think it's going to happen here at 5 for the Giants. I think they end up going with Sonny Styles. He's versatile. You can blitz him. He can play off ball. He can do so many different things. He can cover a variety of different positions. He can really get sideline to sideline. He's arguably one of the most athletic players in the NFL from the moment that he's drafted. Cleveland at number 6 here, I think this is probably, based off how the board has gone so far, a potential trade down situation, just because I think when you look at 7, 8, and so on going down, I think there's a lot of teams in the market for an edge rusher. And with Ruben Bain and David Bailey still sitting there, I could see a world where Cleveland wants to capitalize on taking in more draft capital to continue to holistically build out this team, where they trade down with a team that's a little bit more pressed to try and get an edge rusher. In terms of the mock draft here, I'm not going to be doing any type of trade down stuff, so I'm going to be sticking and picking. I have them getting Carnell Tate, the wide receiver out of Ohio State. I also think that if they were to trade down, they'd be trading down expecting that it's someone coming up to get an edge. so they'd be able to grab their guy probably at 8, 9, and not even have to worry about it because there's a need for the edge. So Carnell Tate, he fits into that offense well. They need more offensive talent. He was running crisp, clean routes at the pro day. I think he's a great fit and a great talent. Number 7, the Commanders. They just need to get younger. They're one of the oldest, if not the oldest team in the NFL. And they just need to get younger, specifically, I think, at defense. And this is where I think the Commanders take their pick on who they prefer more. Do they want David Bailey? Do they want Ruben Bain? I think Ruben Bain is the better player, so I have them sticking and picking and taking Ruben Bain, the edge rusher out of the U, Miami, Florida. Followed by number 8, the Saints. I really like what they're building over there. I think they've got a lot of really awesome things moving with that offense, and I think this is also a spot for an edge rusher. And I think this is kind of the situation I was bringing up where I think they would look into doing a trade-up to ensure that you get the guy that you want between these two. But if the Saints are staying here and just drafting as the board falls, I have them taking David Bailey, the edge out of Texas Tech. Falls right into their lap, fills a need, plays alongside Chase Young, and really helps them continue to grow what they're growing over there. Kansas City got absolutely ravaged in free agency at the defensive back position, and I think this is what they look to build up again. This is another one. Hey, do you want to take a swing on Caleb Downs? Is he the type of guy that you're looking for? And this is certainly what we've seen the NFL shift to, is having these kind of safety hybrid players that can play in the box, they can play in coverage, they can match up at multiple positions, you can line them up in the nickel, kind of like a Kyle Hamilton, Nick Manwari. I think that's where Caleb Downs' strengths are going to be suited, and I could see where Kansas City wants that, but instead I think they need a true corner, and I think they take the best one in the draft so far, and they go with Mansour Delane, the corner out of LSU, and just kind of build up that room a little bit more. And I think there's opportunities based off how the draft goes to maybe take a swing on a safety later, which means that, Cincinnati right here, Caleb Downs just falls right into their lap. I think that type of positional flexibility and versatility is something that they would value over in Cincinnati and something that they need. There's a lot of different defensive positions that they need to get better at. So being able to have a guy like Caleb Downs that can just be used as this really, really technical chess piece anywhere on the field is just going to help make their defense better. He's going to help in the run. He's going to help in the pass. He's going to help on certain matchups, especially in like 2 tight end sets, 12 personnel. Being able to take off one of those big slots, I think is really important. And he's such a talented player. So to get him at 10, I think is great value. And then number 11, the Miami Dolphins probably have the biggest dead cap hit I've ever seen in NFL history. That is insane how quickly they're just starting this rebuild. I love to see it. I love to see the clean sweep. And what I think here is they cut Tyreek Hill. They traded away Jalen Waddle. They're taking on a lot more draft capital to really rebuild this team the right way. I'd like to see them prioritize defense and building up a little more physicality. I just don't think that the board is really conducive for that at this spot right here at 11. So I think they go with a wide receiver and they take whoever they think is the best. I don't think that Mekhi Lemon is better than Jordan Tyson. And then when we also look at how the combine went, Mekhi Lemon tanked his interviews. So for that reason, I don't think that scouts and GMs forget that. And I think Mekhi Lemon starts to take a little bit of a fall in this mock draft. So I have Miami going Jordan Tyson, wide receiver out of Arizona State. A little bit of an injury concern, but they're not worried about it. Number 12, I think they're sprinting this pick in. They're going to go and get their guy. They need a cornerback, and I think they'd be more than happy to take Jermod McCoy, cornerback out of Tennessee. Let's go Vols. He's an unbelievable talent. I think it's just a little bit of a question mark as to, what is it going to be like for him coming back. But I think there's a precedent there. Derek Stingley Jr., for example, his first year at LSU, he was an animal, had a little bit of a regressive year too, but eventually, was picked very highly by the Texans and is arguably one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL, if not the best. So I see the Cowboys going Jermod McCoy. 13, this is where I think I veer a little bit differently from everybody else. At 13 here, I think is traditionally where most people in their mock drafts would be like, all right, perfect. They need a wide receiver. Let's give them Mekhi Lemon here out of USC, the Blitnikoff winner. But when I look at this offense and I look at the players they have, the skill sets they have, and the team that they're building, I think that if you drafted Mekhi Lemon, he would have a little bit redundant of a skill set to the talent that you already have. He plays predominantly in the slot as a bigger slot receiver. And someone who the Rams used a higher draft pick on in the early second round last year was Terrence Ferguson, the tight end out of Oregon, who really came into his own this past year. He took a little bit to get going, but McVay was using him as that second inline tight end. They were motioning him around, and then they were lining him up as your big slot wide receiver. And I think they're going to continue to build off of that. I think Terrence Ferguson is a bigger player. He's going to be better at blocking in the run game. On top of that, he's really coming into his own as a pass catcher. I don't see why they would want to take Mekhi Lemon and then hinder that development that's going on. So for them, I think they look at the future. So for them, we have an aging quarterback who's talented but has a spinal injury that could take him out at any time. And we still have to figure out the future at quarterback. Let's get more protection. I have them going Caleb Lomu, offensive tackle out of Utah. He's a great talent. He fills a need. And I think it makes more sense based off of the board, based off the skill sets that the Rams have and what they're looking to do offensively. Number 14, once again, it's like, hey, is this going to be our Mekhi Lemon spot right here? Do we line Zay Flowers more as a boundary guy and let Lemon be our big slot underneath guy? I think there's a chance. It certainly makes sense. But for the exact same reason that I brought up with the Rams, I think that's exactly what the Ravens want to do too. They have Derrick Henry, and they want to emphasize that power running game. And I think Kenyon Sadiq at, what is his intangibles, 6'3", 245, is certainly going to be a better blocker than 5'11", 195 Mekhi Lemon. I think Kenyon Sadiq is also a much better athlete than Mekhi Lemon. And while you could sit here and say they already have Mark Andrews, they already have a tight end, why do they need a second one? You get way more positional versatility with Sadiq because you can run him as a big slot wide receiver. You can run him in line as a 12 personnel tight end. He's going to be a better blocker. He gives that offense way more, in my opinion, than what Mekhi Lemon does. So I have them doubling up on tight ends now, and they're going to go Kenyon Sadiq out of Oregon, which I think is an amazing pick for them. And that brings us to 15 with the Buccaneers. This is where I think the first kind of reach happens. Just the rankings right here has him put at 30. So I have the Bucs going C.J. Allen. They've had for a couple of years now a glaring need at linebacker. And this year, especially with Levante David retiring, I think this is the year where they finally go and do that. If you watched my mock draft last year, I consistently had them taking Jahad Campbell. And he's the linebacker out of Alabama, and I think he ended up sliding and went to the Eagles in the 30s. But I don't think they can play around with that anymore. So I think they get their off-ball linebacker. They reach a little bit, but they're getting their guy. So it fills a huge need that they have. And we move on to the Jets, and this is the Mekhi Lemon spot right here. Wide receiver out of USC. I don't think he gets past the Jets right here, and I think fit-wise, it makes a lot more sense with the Jets than it does any of the other teams that would potentially be in the market for Mekhi Lemon. So you'll have Garrett Wilson as your number one, your primary boundary guy. Mekhi Lemon will be your underneath slot guy. And then Adonai Mitchell, once they acquired him in the Sauce Gardner trade, really came into his own. A little bit of an issue with drops, but was playing really, really good football, running really good routes, getting good separation. I think he continues to develop and take a step as that second boundary guy in this offense. And then you pair that with the fact that they've got Breece Hall. I think you're building a really strong foundation there and a really good culture for the Jets there, and a team that a quarterback would love to be a part of, because eventually they're going to have to figure out that quarterback position because Geno Smith is just not the guy. But to come out of the first round with Mekhi Lemon and Arvell Reese, I think is exactly what the Jets want to do. 17, I think the Lions, I think I'm going to stay with kind of what the majority of people are doing. I think you have to go interior O-line at this spot. I would consider Keldrick Faulk, edge out of Auburn, because I do think that edge is still a need for this team to pair alongside Aiden Hutchinson. However, me personally, as a Lions fan, I want to see some of the younger guys that we have, like Hassanin, who they just drafted last year in like the 6th round out of Boise State. I want to see him get some opportunities because I think there's a lot of potential there that we're not really recognizing quite yet. So selfishly, I'm going to go the interior offensive line. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but out of Penn State, I'm going to have the Lions going and grabbing him. And then we go into the division to our rivals, the Minnesota Vikings. This is, once again, a couple of different spots that I could see them going. I think they could go O-line, they could go safety, they could go on the defensive line and get an interior guy because I think they've been kind of taking swings at veteran guys to fill that role. So maybe taking like a Peter Woods, who's really falling in this draft, at 18 could make sense. But I think in a Brian Flores scheme, you really need DBs and safeties to be able to space out and cover a lot of distance. And I think that's why they go Dylan Thieneman, safety out of Oregon, with Harrison Smith really getting up there in age. And I think I might have read that he retired. I'm not 100% sure. I just think that safety is a need for them, and I think they address it right here. And I think it fits really well with where the draft is going so far. Carolina, I think, is kicking themselves right now that Kenyon Sadiq went at 14 to the Ravens. I think that was probably who they would pick at 19. I also think that Tampa Bay could potentially be a trade down spot because I do think that's a little bit of a reach. So if there's a world where someone wants to come up and get like Kenyon Sadiq or maybe go and start getting a run on some of these offensive linemen that are starting to fall, like Monroe Freeling, Spencer Fano, Caden Proctor, I could see a world where people are moving up to try and grab an O-lineman. And, you know, obviously I'm not doing trades, but that's exactly what I'm going to have Carolina doing here. I think that they could go wide receiver if there's one of these guys like Omar Cooper, Casey Concepcion, or who's farther down out of Washington, Denzel Boston. If they like a guy enough to take him at 19 here, then I certainly think that they'll pull the trigger on that. But I think Kenyon Sadiq was the weapon that they wanted, and since he's gone already, I think they go and protect their small, young quarterback in Bryce Young, especially as he's getting closer to a contract year. And I have them going Monroe Freeling out of Georgia, blue chip program. He's got great physicals, and I think he'll really help bolster that offensive line for the Panthers. Number 20, their second first-round pick in the draft this year. I had them go in Jermod McCoy with number 12. So number 20 here, I think they can go a couple of different directions. But for them, I think they go with the guy who's falling in the draft board right now. They take edge out of Auburn, Keldrick Faulk. Edge is also a need on this team. There's not really a good linebacker to be drafting as an off-ball guy. Corner, I think you could look at Avion Terrell out of Clemson, and I think that would make a lot of sense to this team and just double up on corner. But since they already took Jermod McCoy, might as well build out this entire defense instead of really dig in on one position. So I have them going Keldrick Faulk, and I think that's a great fit there and just really take a swing on it. 21, I think this is where most people start to say, hey, maybe a second quarterback gets thrown into the first round here. And it's an important position, but at the end of the day, I don't think it happens. I don't think that at 21 there's going to be a quarterback that Mike McCarthy and his team really think help move the needle any further than the quarterbacks that they already have there. So for that reason, I think they focus on other positions of need. And I think there's opportunities within the offensive line that they could go and address. So for that reason, this is where I think Spencer Fano, offensive tackle out of Utah, gets pulled in. And what is his size? 6'6", 308. He's got good size, a little bit on the lighter end of things, but I think he just helps bolster that front line, that offensive line for them. And I think the trenches is something where Pittsburgh really cares about winning and competing, especially when they just re-signed Jalen Warren. And I think they brought in another running back as well in free agency. But they're going to need to be able to establish a run game if they're going to be questionable at quarterback. And speaking of offensive line, I think this is where our run begins again. I think the Chargers have a glaring need on the offensive line, not only as quality starters, but also as just guys who can, be good depth pieces. And I think there's a guy here on the board that is uniquely well suited to be a Charger. Because for them, they have Rashawn Slater, who's coming back from injury to play on the left side. They've got Joe Alt, who's coming back from injury to play on the right side. And then they've got Mekhi Becton, who they're probably going to be slotting to an inside role, which means I think they're looking for another inside guy. However, with how injury prone all of those guys are on their offensive line, I think they're also looking for someone who's got a little bit of versatility, who could, if you need to, slot out to that outside. And that's where I have Caden Proctor, offensive tackle out of Alabama, going. So he's listed as an offensive tackle right now, but I think it's the arm length thing again here. And I think a lot of people are going to say he translates more to an inside guy, which is where I think the Chargers will start to use him. But I think the fact that he has experience at tackle gives him some versatility to slot out to tackle, which would help this team in the event of injury, depth needs, whatever it may be. 23, Philadelphia Eagles. I think they're kicking themselves that C.J. Allen, the linebacker out of Georgia, went that early. That's like Howie Roseman's bread and butter is linebackers out of Georgia. But for them, I think there's a glaring need and there's a great opportunity here. The biggest thing when I watch the Eagles is their cornerback 2 was exposed all the time. Quinyon Mitchell does a great job as the CB1. Cooper DeJean does a great job in the nickel covering the slot. But this is where I think the age of Darius Slay really started to show up. And I think there was a huge liability they had at that CB2, that other boundary spot. So that reason, this is where I think Avion Terrell out of Clemson falling into their lap right here at 23 is a no-brainer. Number 24, the Browns, I had them taking Carnell Tate at 6. I think they continue with bolstering the offense. And I think normally I have them going with either, Caden Proctor or Spencer Fano, depending on who falls. But in this situation, I think they go with the next best guy and they take Blake Miller, offensive tackle out of Clemson, and we double up on the Clemson guys with Avion Terrell and Blake Miller going back to back. At 25 with the Bears, I think this is either an edge or an interior D-line type of role right here. And the fact that Peter Woods, defensive tackle out of Clemson, is falling into their lap at 25, I think it's a no-brainer. Go and get your guy. It looks like teams, in this draft were really prioritizing O-line. So I think because of that, other positions kind of fell, which led to Peter Woods falling to the Bears right here at 25. It's a great pick. It fills a position of need. But I could also see them going with like an Akeem Mesidor, just as more edge versatility. But since Akeem Mesidor fell past 25, I'm going to give him to the Bills right here. I think a lot of people will say, oh, just get them another wide receiver. But I think with the acquisition of DJ Moore, and I think Khalil Shakir will do a great job underneath in the slot. And then I do think that Keon Coleman's getting a bad rap. I think he still needs more time. I think there's still stuff there with the wide receivers they have in-house. And I think there's probably going to be opportunities later on in this draft to take a swing on some more depth guys to create more competition in that wide receiver room. But I think what's important is getting more edge versatility. I don't know if they have AJ Epinesa still, but to pair Mesidor up with Gregory Rousseau, I think would be an elite pairing that would really bolster this defense. 27 is going to be my big reach of this draft, and I don't think I've seen anybody doing this in their mock drafts, so this is going to be my own thing, and I guess I'll die on this hill, but I'm going to have them go Eli Stowers, tight end out of Vanderbilt. So when we look at the 49ers, I think this is another wide receiver spot. With Brandon Ayuk gone, whatever's going on with that, Juwan Jennings gone, and the amount of injuries that this team faced, I think there's absolutely a world where they're like, we need to get more weapons for Brock Purdy to help make this offense as good as it can be. Also, George Kittle had a significant injury at the end of this season that's going to have him out for an extended period of time. On top of the fact he's on the wrong side of 30, and on top of that, I think Eli Stowers is a much better athlete than any other tight end that they have on this roster. And then on top of all of that, I think Kyle Shanahan loves to run 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets, and you can line up Stowers as your big slot underneath guy. You can run him in line. He can block. He can do so many different things that can make your offense better, that I think he fills so many different positions of need for them. And I think the 49ers have a habit of going and getting their guys. With Mykel Williams, who they drafted last year high, that edge, I think they got him at like 11 or 10. I think they're going to be in a good spot with Bosa and Mykel Williams coming back there on the edge. So I think this is an opportunity to really go and get someone that can make your offense better. 28, the Texans, I think they need to go offensive line as well. And I think they end up grabbing an inside guy. I have them going Chase Besantis, offensive guard out of Texas A&M. They've just been trading away a lot of their veteran offensive line guys that have kind of held these roles for a couple years. And I think they just need to get younger there, get more talent there. And I think Chase Besantis will fill that exact need for them. Because you want to protect C.J. Stroud, who's also been heavily pressured as a quarterback over the past few years of his career here. And with him getting closer to a contract year and him still trying to chase that rookie year that he had for himself, I think you got to give him some protection. So I like that pick for them. And then just with how the board's falling for the Chiefs, I think they can go a lot of unique directions here. They could certainly get another interior guy to pair up with Chris Jones. They could go with a wide receiver to get more help there. Of course, you don't know what's going to happen with Rashee Rice. Xavier Worthy really hasn't been that deep threat that you're looking for. And then maybe they want an underneath slot guy. But I think what I end up doing for them is I'm going to have them go and get that safety that they thought they were going to be able to have with Caleb Downs, who I think is falling to them right here, and Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, athletic freak out of Toledo. He can play so many different roles. You could probably slot him into a nickel role. He can help out a lot in the box in the run game. He can play back deep in coverage. I think he gives a lot more positional versatility to that team. On top of now getting Mansour Delane and him, you're really building back that DB area that was ravaged this past offseason. Number 30, Miami. I think they also go defensive back, and I'm going to have them go Colton Hood, the cornerback out of Tennessee. They like to take guys that are a little bit younger that have time to develop. He's also 6 foot, 190, so I think he gives you a little more physicality and a little bit more ability to get involved in the run game and be physical, which is something I think they need to get back to doing. So I think he fits what Jeff Hafley wants to do over there in the defense. 31, I think this is a wide receiver. I have Omar Cooper Jr., wide receiver out of Indiana, going over to Mike Vrabel and the New England Patriots. They just need to go and get more wide receivers. Stephon Diggs was very important in their postseason run last year, and he's not there anymore, so you need someone to fill in those touches. And I think Omar Cooper Jr. makes a lot of sense. And to wrap all of this up at 32 with the Seattle Seahawks, I think they can go a bunch of different directions. I don't think they have a designated need per se, but for me, I'm going to have them also going on the offensive line somewhere and just getting some more help over there. So let's see, who do we have? But now that I look at it, there's not really a lot of great options. So you know what? I'm going to pivot. And I'm going to have them go TJ Parker, edge out of Clemson. Fell to them at 32. Edge is always something that you want to have, flexibility for, and you want to have guys to be able to swap in and out, keep people fresh. I think that makes a lot of sense for them, and he's an unbelievable talent and really showed out during the Senior Bowl. And that's my mock draft. That's my 1.0 2026 NFL mock draft. Let me know where I was egregiously wrong. Let me know where I messed up. Let me know what opinions of mine are just completely fraudulent. But thank you guys for sticking around this long, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.